Welcome to the Clean Mentality Podcast, where we focus solely on what you can do daily to make your life easier physically, mentally, and spiritually. I am your host, Easton Dukevich. Let's get after it.
Big mistake. Even if you are absolutely certain you are correct. Because look, I've been watching this for 28 years. Every time a person finds the correct level, he has a realization. He looks at this and he says, oh, now I understand why I can't get along with my father. He's at this level. See, and I'm at this other level. That explains it. See, he has an insight. So if you tell the person, you are not allowing him to have that realization. People don't want to be told things about them. You know how you hear the wife says, what's wrong with you? You need a better job. You don't make enough money. You don't work harder. The husband doesn't want to hear that. That's not helping him. What she should do is give him the book. See? And he might find where he is on some scales, and that might bring insight to him about his job and his work.
Jim, welcome to the show. So Jim is the author of Septemics, his book on analysis, prediction, and management of human affairs. Jim, what can you tell us about your book on Septemics?
Phenomena, which greatly aided the understanding of people, from which I constructed a revolutionary practical philosophic system called Septemics, and published into the book Septemics, Hierarchies of Human Phenomena.
So, what is Septemics exactly? Because I have never heard of this concept before, or at all any information on it, and I was really interested when you reached out to us on the podcast format to connect. So tell us a little bit about that.
Okay, well, Septemics is a philosophical science based on the fact that many phenomena related to human beings occur in a sequence of 7 levels. Literally, the word septemics means of or pertaining to 7. Septemics comprises a collection of scales or sequences, each of which breaks down various human phenomena into a hierarchy of 7 steps. There are 35 such scales, each of which is unique, and together they span the spectrum of human experience, by which I mean any problem, dilemma, situation, difficulty that a person has can successfully be analyzed by one or more of these scales.
Got it. So what made you 25 years ago want to even start researching this? What sparked the idea?
Well, the story really began when I was accepted into engineering school at the age of 16. Now, I thought at the time that I was going to be engineering physical things, such as electrons, airfoils, motors, and so forth. But by the time I had my bachelor's degree, it was clear that I wanted to engineer the human psyche, which is not a physical thing, because it is the area of greatest unknown, of greatest mystery, and more importantly, it is the area in which we as a race are failing miserably. 95% of the problems in industrialized society are because people don't understand people, don't understand the wife, don't understand the son, don't understand the boss, don't understand somebody running for office, etc., etc., etc. And this book solves that problem. It gives you a whole toolkit to analyze people and really understand what they're about, where they're coming from, and you can predict what they're going to do as a result of this.
What were you feeling in that moment when you were like, people don't understand, all of these different, people running for office and your boss and your own wife? Like, what was going through your mind that having that feeling?
It wasn't really a feeling. It was more like just a realization that, see, by the time I was a very scholarly person. I went to school for 28 years. So by the time I had my bachelor's degree, I knew what was in the mainstream. I knew all the main subjects: chemistry, physics, biology, mathematics, history, and so forth. And so in between all of these subjects were huge gaps that were completely unexplained. And since the human race is not failing technologically, we're failing humanistically. I saw that there was a need for this. So, to make a long story short, I had a long career as a human development engineer, using engineering principles, working one on one with hundreds of clients over thousands of hours cumulatively, helping them to achieve their goals faster and easier and resolve their problems. As I was doing this, I started to notice pretty early on that I could predict the outcome of the session. In other words, not only would the person improve, I would know how he would improve. Now, I never told this to anyone, but I made notes. And as the decades rolled by, I came to realize that the client was at a specific level on a specific scale that I had previously observed. And as a result of our interaction, the person would go up to the next highest level. Every time that happened, and this happened thousands and thousands of times, it verified my hypothesis, which is what the scientific method is about. So I had decades of verification of this. Now, by 1995, a couple of things happened. One is that I had about 32 scales that I had just observed and written down. There was no theory of septemics. But also, I had one scale in particular that had 6 levels that I absolutely knew was correct. I had been using it on a daily basis for decades. Well, one day in 95, I was pondering a difficult client, and I realized that this person was at a level on this scale that I had not previously observed. That was obvious to me when I saw what the level was, where to insert it. And when I inserted that level into the 6 level scale, it manifested mathematically. Having taken 26 semesters of math and loved every minute of it, I saw that this was significant. This had to be natural law, because anything that has mathematics embedded in it, like, for example, the Fibonacci sequence, is natural law. So then I said, wait a minute. I wonder how many of these other scales that I have are actually 7 level scales that hadn't been developed all the way, because I wasn't developing anything. I was just helping my clients and making notes. So, knowing what I was looking for, I inspected all of these other scales. And voila, in a short period of time, each of them went to 7 levels. And when it did, it manifested mathematically. So suddenly I had 32 7 level scales that all had mathematics embedded in them. And I said, I could go from helping people by the hundreds, which is what I had been doing as human development engineer, to helping people by the millions if I put this data in a book and get it out. So I'm going to have to write a book.
Right.
This was the first version of the book was finished in December of 95. And I sent it to colleagues of mine, each of whom had a graduate degree in a variety of subjects. And they all responded very positively and loved it. So then I said, okay, this is what I think it is. And I spent the next 25 years writing this book. And you have to realize that first I had to discover the phenomena. And I kind of already told you how most of that was done in my sessions. And then after I would see it in the session, I would go out in the world and I would see it right in front of my face. It was there.
Hmm.
Then I had to take this data and I had to engineer it into a workable philosophic system. Now, you have to realize, as an engineer, I'm only interested in facts and results. In the world of engineering, whatever you're making must work. There's no such thing as oops. You know, if you put up a bridge, that bridge must stand. You have to calculate the currents, you have to calculate the wind shear, you have to calculate the weight of when it's full of cars, and then you have to put buffers in there. And that's how the world of engineering is. Engineers are not interested in opinions or beliefs as far as engineering goes. That's a separate thing. So it took 20 years to take this data and turn it into a workable philosophic system. You have to realize that what was happening during this period is I would write the book, I would release it. To colleagues, students, associates, and so forth. And then I would get feedback from them. And then I would rewrite it. So there were many rewrites. And my intention from day one was to create a system that would help people, help the average reader of English. And I know I succeeded at that because since the book has been out for 3 years, I've been seeing results. But even before that, when these previous versions of the book were out, I was seeing results. People get this. When you read this, it's like putting on glasses and looking in a mirror, or putting on glasses and looking at another person. You see clearly what's there. You say, oh, now I see why I don't get along with my mother. It's because of this, this, and this. So it's very user friendly. So that's how this all came about.
So is that part right there? So I'm doing something that's a mental challenge called 70. It's not a challenge, a mental recalibration program called 75 Hard. Have you ever
Uh-huh.
heard of that?
No.
Okay, so what it is 75 days of you do a workout uh indoors for 45 minutes and you do a workout outside for 45 minutes. You
Uh-huh.
read 10 pages of a book every single day. You drink 1 gallon of water and you don't drink any alcohol and you don't have any cheat meals and you follow a meal plan.
Right.
And this program, when people have fully completed it and gone to the exact nth of every single day doing that same thing, routine wise, time management, every single person that's completed it has had a tremendous mental recalibration and kind of an awareness, like you're trying to talk about with Septemics, as far as, like, okay, no wonder I didn't get along. No wonder I shouldn't have this person in my life because they were
Right.
this influence in my life. And it's
Yeah.
just crazy because what you just said, it makes so much sense as far as the awareness level that I have now and 41 days into this is all there. So I
Now,
know
when
it,
you just to clarify what you said, when you say workout, do you mean workout physically,
a
like
physical
lifting
workout.
weights or running or something?
It can be any sort of indoor workout, and then the outdoor one could be
Okay.
walking, can be, yeah.
So what do you do if there's a blizzard or a hurricane or a tornado or something? You miss it, or what do you
As
do?
long as long as it's not something that's going to say kill you, then you do it,
Uh-huh.
regardless of whatever weather. Yeah.
Interesting. I can see how that would help people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Actually, it's not far from how I live. I have been
okay.
working out on a daily basis since I was a child, and I have been meditating on a daily basis since I was an adult. That's what I do every day, and so it just keeps making me clearer and clearer and clearer and and elevating me up these scales. In
Right.
other words, I've been pushing myself up these scales that are in the book. Even before I knew what they were, I was sort of doing this. Now it's just that I have it down to a science where it's very specific.
And I'll have to read it too because I feel bad I didn't have time to read it before this, but um, it sounds similar to what a lot of us in the self development community kind of talk of as far as like the different levels. Is it sort of like as far as like more opportunities open up as you consistently do things and become better at them? Is that sort of what it is, or
Well, this is a very large, very complex subject. And
yeah,
I wrote it in a way that if you just go through the book and follow the instructions, you'll get it. I've been seeing people get it for 28 years. It's not hard to get, but it's not something that I can explain in 25 words or less, as they
right?
say.
Okay,
But what I would like to do is tell you the names of these 35 scales, because then you'll know exactly what subject matter is covered in the book. May I do that?
go ahead. Yeah, that sounds
Okay.
great.
So there are 24 individual scales and 11 group scales. These are the individual scales, meaning they apply primarily to an individual. The scale of basic purposes, the scale of personal influence, the scale of choice, the scale of permeation, the scale of thought, the scale of identity, the scale of evaluation, the scale of motivation, the scale of control, the scale of stopping, the scale of scholarship, the scale of literacy, the scale of human ability, the scale of memory, the scale of spiritual identity, the scale of mental deletion, the scale of aberration, the scale of physical fitness, the scale of justification, the scale of belief, the scale of equanimity, the scale of attack, the scale of conflict, and the scale of reaction. And these are the group scales, the scale of relationships, the scale of life spheres, the scale of government, the scale of civilization, the scale of survival, the scale of management, the scale of exchange, the scale of communication, the scale of allegiance, the scale of sexuality, and the scale of politics. Any one of these scales by itself can dramatically change the person's life. It depends on the person and what he has going on in his life and how he relates to it. But if you together, it's like a system that propels you upward because this is all about insight. It requires a certain amount of insight to use these scales. In other words, you have to have some insight to look at it and understand it. But more importantly, it develops insight because when you spot a level correctly, you have a realization. You say, oh, now I see what's going on here. You see, that's an insight. Now, because you have more insight, you are better able to use the book. So you go to another scale, and because you are more insightful now, you will be even better able to use it in the same way. And you just keep using it. And if I may, I'd like to tell you how you can use it to improve yourself in a very specific way.
Of course, that's what we're
Okay.
all about here.
Okay. So I wrote this book to help people. I have had a lifetime of helping people. Each of these scales provides the user with an infallible way of determining the salutariness or beneficialness of any group, individual, or activity. If the group, individual, or activity moves persons up these scales, it's beneficial or positive. If it moves them down, it's detrimental or negative. So you see, I'm giving you a yardstick for human phenomena, which is an entirely new thing. More importantly, just finding out what level you or another person is at on any scale is by itself enlightening and beneficial because you have a realization. And finally, once you know the actual level of any person on any scale, you can improve that person, whether it's yourself or another, by moving them up one level. Now that's significant because this solves the gradient problem. You see, most people have problems, difficulties, and situations and dilemmas and they don't know how to fix them because they don't know the gradient. Each level in every scale is the gradient for that level. So, for example, in the scale of choice, there are 7 levels of choice, and you are at some level on that as regards some context. And if you can correctly spot your level, you will be able to move yourself up to the next level above it. Let's say you find you're at level 4. If you try to move to level 3, you will get there. If you try to move to level 1 or 2, you will fail because it's too steep a gradient. Every good coach, therapist, facilitator, teacher in the world understands that human development must be done by a gradient. And the good teachers and facilitators and therapists understand this. That's what I did as human development engineer. I would pick up the guy where he was, and then I would move him to the next level up. And he would have a realization, and then he would have more control over his life. So all of these advantages that I just told you about how to use this represent major steps forward for society. Each of these scales is an axis against which to evaluate human behavior, and combined, they empower one to understand, predict, and manage human affairs to a degree hitherto unattainable by most.
So when you said a minute ago about how you move someone up the scale, one of your clients per se, can you give us an example of how to use Septemics to help someone?
Okay, so let me give you like a real life situation, a hypothetical real life situation, how you use this book. let's say you have a buddy who's having romance problems, right? Your buddy Joe, he's complaining to you for 6 months. I don't know what I'm going to do about my wife. She's cheating on me again. She says she wants a divorce. She kicked me out, blah, 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 right? And you've been listening to this for 6 months. So you say, Joe, come here, let me show you something. And you open the book to the scale of relationships and you show it to him. Now he's going to probably say, you mean there's a scale of relationships? I never heard of this. And you say, yes. This relationship that you've been complaining to me about for 6 months, where is it on this scale? He's going to want to know that because he's having trouble and you just opened the door for him. So what's going to happen is in a matter of seconds, 15, 20, 25 seconds, he's going to find a bracket. He's going to say something like, well, I can see right away levels 1, 2, and 3 don't apply because we're having a lot of trouble. And also 7 doesn't apply. That's got nothing to do with us. So it's got to be 3, 4, 5. So you see, that's progress. He got it from 7 down to 3. So you say, all right, now look, go ahead and read the text, and then you'll be able to get it exactly. He's going to want to do that because you're going to help him solve this problem. So he reads the text, and you can help him the way a tutor would help somebody. If you had somebody you were tutoring on math or history or something, you would help them, right? So he reads it, he understands, then he comes back and say, okay, now, where is it? Where is this relationship on this guy? And now he knows this relationship because he's been living with it for maybe a year and he just read it. He's going to say, well, now that I read this, I can see we're at level 5. No wonder we're having a lot of trouble. That's near the bottom of the scale. See, he'll have a realization. He might have something very specific. Well, that explains why boppity 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 bop happens all the time. See? And you say, okay, we can move you, if you wish, from 5 up to 4. You can? Yes, because that's the next level up. And if you work with Maisie, your girl, you can improve this relationship. Oh, you see? Then you say, now let me show you something else. And you open it up to the scale of sexuality. He's going to say, you mean there's a scale of sexuality? And you say, yes. You don't have to tell me if you don't want, but where are you on this scale? And he looks at it. He's going to want to know this because he's having trouble with this area. And he's going to find a bracket. He's going to say something like, well, it's definitely not 6 or 7. That has nothing to do with me. And it's definitely not 1 or 2. I don't even understand those. So it's got to be like 3, 4, or 5. See? And so you say, okay, go ahead, read it, and then you can get it exactly. So he reads it, you help him, comes back, and he says, I can see now I'm at level 4. That explains why I'm having trouble with Maisie, because she's at level 5, and that is an obvious conflict. If you look at the scale of sexuality, it is obvious that some of these levels are not compatible. So you don't have to be at the same level, but you have to be at a compatible level. And that's why sometimes you see people who are smart, attractive, like one another, but can have a romantic relationship, but it doesn't work. Very often it's because they have a conflict on the scale of sexuality. So now what Joe does with this is up to him. We're not telling him what to do. He might say, you know what? I'm done with her. I don't want to bother with her anymore. Or he might say, I'm going to use this to fix our relationship. I'm going to help her with this. Let her look at this and bring her up to 4, and then we'll both be on the same level and it will work. See, that's up to him. So all you're doing is giving him the tool. See, now you can say, okay, look at this. And you show him the scale of permeation. He says, what the hell is that? And you explain to him, as I do in the book, permeation is the basic ability of a spiritual being. When 2 people love one another, it's because they are permeating one another. So there are people who are very good at other things who don't permeate very well. Sometimes you see somebody who's not very good at something, but he does well anyway. It's because he's permeating. So he can look at this and he go through the same process. Look at the scale, see? And again, everything is defined in the book. It defines permeation, etc. Look at it. Oh, yeah, I see permeation. So, and you go through the same process. He'll find a bracket. He'll say, well, I don't even understand 1 or 2, so it can't be me. It's got to be one of these bottom 5. Okay, go ahead and read it. comes back, he finds it, and you say, okay, now let's move you up to the next level so you can permeate better, so you'll have a better relationship. See, he's going to want to do that because he's having trouble. Now, I could keep doing this for another half dozen scales because when you get into something big like an interpersonal relationship, it's complex. It has many dimensions to it. We could go into the scale of motivation. We could go into the scale of allegiance. We could go into the scale of identity. All of these things are going to be factors, you see? So if he gets this book and uses it, he can use maybe a dozen different scales to analyze this and look at it from different directions. And in each case, he can find his level and move himself up. Now, in the introduction to the book called Introduction to Septemics, there's a whole long passage on how to use this to move yourself up to the next level. And there's an even longer passage on how to use this to move other people up to the next level. And I give specific techniques and explain the whole process, how it works and why it works. So I can't really explain that in this short podcast, but it's in the book. And in fact, it's even on my website, because if you go to septemics.com, the introduction to Septemics is there. You can read the whole thing. And it tells you right there how to do it. So then you just have to get the skills, understand them, and use them.
So when you use the book, it's literally a guide for anything that you could think of as far as your life goes. Like you have different sections for emotional things, relationships, physical health, maybe.
Yes.
I think I
Yes.
heard you say that. Yeah,
Yes.
it's just yeah.
Anything that's related to human affairs is covered. So you can't, if you have a broken down car, this isn't going to help you. You need a book on auto mechanics, or you have to get a mechanic to fix it. But anything about humans, it fixes. Now let me explain this. I'm an engineer. I understand people and realize I had a long career, 40 years of helping people as human development engineer. I understand people the way an aeronautical engineer understands airplanes, the way an automotive engineer understands cars.
All right.
And
So
this
can
led
I
me,
give you?
sure.
Go ahead. Go ahead. Sorry.
So this led me eventually to recognizing this data, writing it down, and because of my polymathic background, I was able to see what this was. And then, as I said, I spent 25 years developing it to make it foolproof. And there are many things in the book that make it accessible to the average reader. There are glossaries, not only in front of every chapter, even in front of the introduction, there's a glossary. So I'm telling you the meanings of the words. Like you have a scale, it's got 7 levels. I give you the meaning of all those 7 words. So it's very precise, because that is my engineering mind, is to make this in a way that if somebody wants to improve himself or others, he can do it.
As far as like an opposing view to this, maybe not opposing. I'm thinking in my own head, like I'm a man of God, so like I'm thinking as far as like the Bible goes, and as far as this goes, like are you are you faithful in any way, or are you just are you spiritually based? I'm assuming.
Well, definitely spiritually based. I am an expert in theology. It's something I studied extensively across many religions. I try not to get into discussions of religion because it's a volatile subject, but my meditation every day is intensely spiritual. And really, it brought me to every day in more and more to an appreciation and understanding of all the religions of the world, how they
Okay.
work, why they work, what about them makes them work, and so forth. So have a lot of understanding about that. Remember, there's a scale of spiritual identity. So anyone who's aware that he's a spiritual being will love that scale,
Right.
because you can find exactly what level you're at. And that one scale explains so much about people, because a person's spiritual identity has enormous impact on his entire life.
No, yeah, as far as spirituality, because that's what I was like the entire past 2 years, prior to 2023. And on this channel, like, we try to, support anyone's views, but I just was interested as far as what your thoughts were with
Right.
related to a religion. So
Yeah.
yeah. Do you have anything else you want the audience to?
Sure.
Yeah.
I want to say that the data in this book are vital for every person and can help you to achieve your goals faster and easier by explaining what might otherwise seem to be inexplicable or random. If someone were to invite you to a rendezvous, you would certainly expect them to tell you the exact time, date, location, and perhaps how to get there. Needless to say, it's difficult to get someplace if you don't know where you're starting from, don't know where you're going, and don't know how to get to your destination. Now, this sounds idiotic, but most people do this regularly. Most people do not know in any given context where they are, where they're going, or how to get there. And some people do this continuously. These are the people who just go in a circle all the time, get nowhere. So this book solves that problem because it tells you across all these different axes where you are. And then once you know where you are, the next level up is where you will go if you succeed. So it's basically a roadmap for success across 35 axes. But let me explain something. There are general scales and specific scales. In a general scale, once you find your level or another person's level, you're done with that scale. You can move up to the next level, but that's all you can do with it. In a specific scale, and most of them are specific, it's context driven. For example, the scale of motivation. Look at the scale of motivation. You have to have a context. What is my motivation toward my wife? What is my motivation toward my son? What is my motivation toward my pastor? What is my motivation toward my boss? And what is my boss's motivation toward me? What is my father's motivation toward me? What is my daughter's motivation toward me? So you could take this one scale and you could use it hundreds of different times. Each time you get a correct analysis, you'll have a realization. So, oh, now I understand what's going on with Pastor Jones. His motivation is this thing. See, and my motivation is this thing. So we're a little out of alignment there. See? So this is really useful stuff.
It sounds like a useful tool for definitely in business and in your daily life, 9 to 5 jobs too, like understanding people, because you have all
Absolutely.
all those conflicts of, oh, my boss said this to me and I
That's right.
couldn't handle it, and
Right.
you know what, screw him, that kind of deal.
Yeah.
So it makes
See,
sense.
this book gets rid of the screw him because when you understand what's going on, you're not emotional about it. Now, look, if you invited me to your home and said, Jim, come on over, I want to show you my garden, I'd say, great, I'd come over, right? And you take me out in the yard, and I would see perhaps peonies, tulips, roses, nasturtiums, hydrangeas, violets, right? Now, I can say that because I know flowers. Now, if you bring in a little 5-year-old kid, he doesn't know that. All he knows is they're pretty and they're different colors and they smell nice. That's all he knows. Now, most people, as regards human affairs, are like that little kid. They don't know what they're looking at. So when I look at a person, I can analyze them just like that. This guy's at this level on this scale. Because I'll tell you a secret. People tell you their levels. It comes right out of their mouths. So if you
So what
observe,
is sorry?
go ahead.
So what is my level?
Well, another datum about this is I tell everyone never divulge the level of any person on any scale if we're talking about a living person. I will not do that because it's counterproductive and it's unethical. And it tends to get into judgmentalness. This is not about judgment. I even tell people, let's say you figure out your level on a scale. Don't tell people what it is. If they want to figure it out, they can get the book and figure it out themselves, or you can loan them the book. Now, if you have a very close relationship, like if you have a spouse and you're very close, and you want to divulge your level on a certain scale, maybe that's okay. But I would never say tell her level. Big mistake. Even if you are absolutely certain you are correct. Because look, I've been watching this for 28 years. Every time a person finds the correct level, he has a realization. He looks at this and he says, oh, now I understand why I can't get along with my father. He's at this level. See, and I'm at this other level. That explains it. See, he has an insight. So if you tell the person, you are not allowing him to have that realization. People don't want to be told things about them. You know how you hear the wife says, what's wrong with you? You need a better job. You don't make enough money. You don't work harder. The husband doesn't want to hear that. That's not helping him. What she should do is give him the book. See? And he might find where he is on some scales, and that might bring insight to him about his job and his work. See? So this is just a very user-friendly book. I went out of my way to design these scales to wrap around the reader. So using this book is like buying a suit. You go to a clothing store, right? They have 10,000 suits. So the idea is you want to walk out of there with a suit that you like, right? So you have to look at color, size, fabric, what kind of an occasion it's going to be, right? All these different reasons, right? And you narrow it down, you try them on, and at the end, you're $500 poorer, but you have a nice suit, looks good, and it's just right for what you want. That is how this book works. You are selecting. Now, when you go to a clothing store, you have 10,000 suits. When you look at a scale, you only have 7 levels. You're not selecting from 10,000 levels. So, for example, if I were to go out here on the street and stop some guy and say, what's your wife's motivation for you? He would look at me like I was from Mars. He would say something like, how could I know that? There are thousands of motivations. It could be. No, there are only 7. And all the others are just subsets of these. Really? Well, look at the scale. And when he looks at the scale, he'll go through that process. He'll say, well, it's not that, it's not that. He'll get it down to a bracket. And it's either this or this. All right, read it. He reads it, and he comes back, well, I can see now her motivation is that. So let me give you an example how that would work in real life. Let's say you have a couple that's been dating, and they're talking about getting married. Wouldn't it be smart for that guy to know why this woman wants to marry him? I mean, wouldn't that be a good thing for him to know? I'm not saying he has to tell anybody, but for his own edification, right? So maybe he looks at it and he determines, because she knows this woman for 2 years, that she wants to marry him because she loves him. Okay, that's level 1. That's maybe for him, that's a good reason. But maybe he says, you know what? I think she's motivated. I think she wants to marry me because I drive a Corvette. I have a 60-foot yacht. I fly my own Learjet. I have a $10 million condo, and I have 10,000 shares of Apple. That's why she wants to. That explains X, Y, and Z. Now, you might say, what's he going to do with that? Well, a couple of things. It depends on the guy. He might say, I don't want to marry a gold digger. We're done. And he breaks up with her. Now, you might think he's going to be bummed out by that. He's not. He's going to be relieved. You just saved this guy a lot of trouble getting married to a gold digger and saving him paying $10,000 a month alimony for the next 10 years. Right? So he's not going to be bummed out. He's going to be happy. Now, they might have another guy for whom that's okay. Have you ever noticed how many rich, older, unattractive men are married to young, beautiful women. Have you ever
Yes.
noticed that? There's lots of these guys. You see some guy, he's like 60, and he's like married to this Miss Texas or something, you know? How does that work? I'll tell you how it works. The wife gets a Mercedes, a diamond ring, a mink coat, a pearl necklace, and a credit card. She's happy. What's not to like? The guy's happy because she's married to Miss Texas. So to him, he may not care that she's a gold digger. He might say, "Oh, you want to go to Vegas for the weekend? Here's $5,000. Have a good time." See? He might just. So it's up to the guy what he does with it. The point is, you know what you're dealing with. So when I was a young man, this data didn't exist. I hadn't discovered it. And so I made the same stupid mistakes that everybody else makes. But now that I know this book upside down, inside out, and backwards, for me, those mistakes cannot happen, will not happen, do not happen. Okay? So I'll meet some girl and I'll see, she's at a low level on a couple of scales. Thank you very much. Have a nice day. We're done. You see? I'm not going to waste it because I see it. And I see it because I know it. Now, did you ever notice this thing? Let's say you have a guy who has a car that's not common. Let's say a Sunbeam, right? That's an English car. I don't even know if they still make them, right? He drives a
I don't know what
Sunbeam.
that is.
Yeah, it's an English sports car, a little English sports car. They might be out of business by now, right? So, oh, Sunbeam. Oh, okay, yeah. And then you're driving around. Oh, there's a Sunbeam. Oh, there's another stuff. Did you ever notice that? How that happens? You know why? Because you know Sunbeam now. So that happened to me with Audi. Like I had a friend, he said, "What kind of car do you?" He's got an Audi. I never heard of an Audi before. This is a long time ago. Oh,
Yeah.
yeah. So now I see a guy with an Audi. Oh, there's an Audi, see? So that's how this is. You know the scale, you know the manifestations, and so you see, this person is at that level. Now, what you do about it is up to you. And I'll give you an example. Let's say you meet somebody who's a very upscale person. In other words, this person is at or near the top of many of these scales, right? That's what I call an upscale person. So this is somebody who say, "Oh, this is somebody I want in my life." Could be an associate, could be an employee, could be a spouse, it could be a friend, okay? But like most people, he's probably going to be lower on some other scales. And if you know that, you can sort of tiptoe around it and not make it a bone of contention in the relationship. So it helps the relationship that you understand. I'm not saying you say anything about it, you just know it. So, for example, I'll give you an example. I have three sisters. Two of them are conservatives and one of them is a liberal. I get along great with all of them, okay? Because I know it. I don't make it a bone of contention. I know what to not say, what to say. I just sort of dance around it, and I get along great with them. And that is what this book helps you to do across 35 axes. So let's say, because we talk about the scale of motivation, let's say you want to hire a guy to work for you, right? Let's say you own a used car lot and you need a salesman, right? So you have a guy come and interview him, and you can see that this guy's money motivated. That's all he cares about. You look in his eyes and you see dollar signs. That's good. That's what you want. You want him out there selling those cars for you. See? If he's not a money motivated person, he's not going to do a good job for you as a salesman. I've often said, I would be a terrible salesman. I'm not a money motivated person. You know, I would be the kind of guy I would say, you can get this same car up the street $6,000 less, right? And
He wouldn't make very many sales.
right, I wouldn't make any sales. So you might find a person who's money motivated, say, "This is what I want." You don't care what this guy is on these other scales. You don't care if he smokes dope. You don't care if he drinks. You want him selling your cars. That's why you're hiring him, right? So great, money motivated, come on in. See, so it depends on the context, what your relationship is, what you want, what you're looking for. But when you know what you're dealing with, it facilitates the relationship. And I'll give you an example. There's a scale of literacy, right? If I were talking to Jordan Peterson, for example, or Stephen Wolfram, I would be talking to them in a certain way because I would have complete confidence they would understand everything I said. But I've had a lot of housekeepers, people come in and clean my house. I'm not going to talk to them the same way. They're at a lower level of literacy. I'm not going to use words like contumacious, serendipity. You see, I'm going to say, there's a big mess in the kitchen, clean it. That they understand. So, because I know the person's literacy. So, look, I could be standing online in the supermarket, right? And there's two guys behind me talking, right? I can tell just by listening to them talk what their levels of literacy are. So, if I wanted to talk to them, I would talk to them at their level of literacy. So, for example, I had clients who came to me from Europe whose first language was not English. So I had to keep that in mind when I worked with them. I had to be very careful to make sure they understood what I was saying and what was going on in the session. See? So that's like a way that I used my knowledge of the scale of literacy. So that's just one of a million examples that I could give you. And you got to realize this is not hard to do. If you can read English reasonably well, you can do this. You don't have to have a college degree to understand this. All you have to have is a pretty good facility with the English language and just follow the instructions in the book. What I tell everybody is this is a textbook on an entirely new subject. So when you get it, read it the way you would read a chemistry text, a physics text, a math text, an economics text. You start at line 1 of page 1 and you read it and you make sure you understand it. And if you don't, you work on it and clear it up. Then you go to line 2 and you go through the book the whole way like that. Then, after you get to the end, you go back to the beginning and read it again, and then find your level on every scale. And by the time you get to the end of the second reading, you will be a new person. You will be a greatly clarified person because you will understand who you are, what you're about. I'll give you an example. The scale of basic purposes. Nothing is more important than knowing someone's basic purpose. It's what the person is trying to do all the time. So I'll look at a person, I'll see what his basic purpose is. That informs me. I know what this person is trying to do. I'm not going to expect this person to operate the way someone would who's at a different level. See? It explains so much about the person. And when you find your level on that scale, it's a life-changing event. You say, now I see this is what I'm about. This is my purpose. And you throw out the other 6 levels, they're not for you. And so you go through life with clarity. You know what you're trying to do.
I like that. That's, yeah. Wow. I've never heard anything like it before, and I really, it's opened my mind too. I'm probably going to read the book myself, more than likely. So, I really appreciate you taking the time today. And as far as where can the audience find you and your book again, just so they remember?
Okay, well, I invite them to my website, septemics.com, Septemics, where you can see what many readers have said, what many journalists have written, what the reviews are. You can read sections of the book itself. And if you want, you can listen to a pre recorded introduction to Septemics, which explains it in a way that any normal English speaking person will understand.
I like that part because a lot of people would think, he's got 28 years of school. How am I going to understand what he's saying? I'm glad you've
I'll
taken
tell
the
you, I'll
time.
tell you
Yeah.
exactly how. Exactly how.
So,
I worked with people as a human development engineer for 40 years. And you have to realize, when the person would come into me, I would interview him. What's the situation? What's going on here, right? And of course, there were different dimensions of this, and I have to forget the whole detail, right? Okay, so then when we go into the session, I know about this guy. I know what his situation is, I know what he wants to do, I know what his barriers are, blah, 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 right? So from that point forward, I have to be able to spot what this guy is doing in a very sophisticated way to get him to where he wants to be. This is what is called Socratic dialogue. If you read the Socratic dialogues, which were written by Plato His teacher was Socrates. Socrates never wrote anything down, or at least we don't have anything. So all we know about Socrates is what Plato wrote. And there's a whole thing called Socratic dialogue, where the whole idea of those dialogues, there's many of them. He would talk to the person and not tell the person anything, but draw him out. Say, well, what do you think of this? Oh, really? Well, how do you know that's true? You see, that type of thing. And eventually the person would have an epiphany. Oh, now I see what ethics is about. You see? So that's sort of what I was doing all the time. And I did a lot of tutoring. Now, when you tutor somebody, you have to realize the person never knows what he doesn't understand. If he knew what he didn't understand, he would understand it. So I would spend a lot of time trying to figure out what he doesn't understand. So I would ask questions like, let's say I'm tutoring this guy in algebra. What's the function? See, if he can't tell me in 1 second, I have him look it up. It has a precise meaning in algebra. Okay, what's an exponent? See, if he doesn't give me the right answer immediately, I have him look it up. That alone, I found, solved a lot of the problems. By the time a guy knows what a function is, he knows what an exponent is, he knows what absolute value means, he knows what an equation is, he knows what a variable is, then he looks, oh, now this makes sense to me. So it's like detective work. So
Yeah, and that's kind of what I was getting at too. Is your clients? It's kind of mysterious to me too, because I'm like, what kind of clients would he have? Is he like a CIA type of person? I don't know. It sounds like something they would do. You know what I mean? So
people would
yeah,
come to me and I would help them improve their lives. Sometimes, most of the time, the person would have an unwanted condition. Like I had one client who was a drunk. He had a drinking problem. Okay. I had another client who had a bad marriage. So people have different. So that's like an unwanted condition they're trying to resolve. But some people, it's the other way. It's like, I want to be a famous movie star. That's like what is on his mind. And I would sort of help him unravel that and get him down to an understanding of it where he would know when he left the session, he would know better who he was, what he wanted to do, why he wanted to do it. Sometimes people would change their minds in the session. They'd say, I realized that I don't really want to be a movie star. I really want to be a producer. You see, that would be like a realization the guy would have. And so being an actor was only like a stepping stone for him. So anytime you're getting the person to have insight into himself, his life is going to get better because he understands what's going on. And that is the whole key. It gets you to spot the good people and bring them into your life and the bad people and get them out of your life. So when I say good, I'm talking about upscale and downscale.
sure. Yeah,
So like Adolf Hitler, for example, his basic purpose was to destroy. Now, many people won't understand that. How could that be somebody's basic purpose? It doesn't make any sense. Well, there aren't too many people like that, but he was one of them. And if you actually study the man, which I did extensively, I read many books, many documentaries, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. After you know his basic purpose, then it makes sense. Because I'm a student of military science, and he did things that, strictly from the viewpoint of military science, made no sense at all. Why is he doing that? Hermann Goering told him, if the Soviets get into the war, we will lose. Hermann Goering was the second in command. He did it anyway. You know why? He was destructive. He was not only destructive to the Allies, he was destructive to Germany. He was destructive to the Wehrmacht. He was destructive to his own family. Okay? So once I understood that, now I understand why he did what he did. See, before it was like mysterious. Why would he do that? I don't get it. This doesn't make any sense. Well, from a military science point of view, it doesn't make any sense. When you realize you're dealing with a person who's destructive, now and this works all the way through the book. You have a realization about the person. Okay, this person is at level 5 on the scale of choice. A person at level 5 on the scale of choice does not want to make a choice. He wants somebody else to make it, like Hitler or Stalin or Mussolini. That's who votes for those people.
so I really appreciate you coming on today, Jim, and it was a really good talk. And I hope everyone can take a look at your book and see what it's all about as far as the scales, and they can improve their lives through that.
Thank you, Easton. It was a pleasure.
I appreciate it.
Have a great day.